4 o'clock and we will now open the meeting. So welcome to the Hobart Workshop Committee meeting of the 20th of April 26 here at the Lady Osborne room. I advise all present that an audio recording is being made of the meeting, and we all know regulation number 8 of meeting procedures of our behaviour and how that should be towards ourselves, other people in the chamber and those listening as well. All mobile phones should be turned off or it's silent. Okay, so present we have here today Councillor Bill Harvey, Councillor Ryan Posselt, Councillor Ben Loberg, Councillor Mike Dutta, Councillor Louise Elliott, Alderman Louise Bloomfield, Alderman Marty Zuko, myself, Councillor John Kelly and the CEO Michael Stretton. CEO, are there any apologies for today?
No apologies, just have the Lord Mayor on leave of absence.
Thank you.
Councillor Kitsos's apology. Through me, is that okay?
So Councillor Kissos.
Yeah, we just get it recorded in the
Okay,
minutes.
great. Acknowledgement of country. I recognise all those who stood in this ground before us, and I also remember those who have come here as slaves and migrants and built the place where we are living today and working and meeting on the land of the Moana people. Confirmation of minutes. The minutes of the open portion meeting are submitted for confirming, so I'd invite someone to move those. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Dutta. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Motion carried unanimously. Item 3, consideration of supplementary items. Are there any supplementary items today, CEO?
None today, Chair.
Being none, we'll move on to item number 4, indications of conflict of interest. If any elected members wish to indicate any interest in any item appearing on the open agenda and having a conflict of interest there. There being none, we'll move on to item number 5, transfer of agenda items. Any items proposed for transfer, either in the open or closed agenda today? No? There being none, we will move on to reports. Okay, item number 6.1, the 25-26 annual plan progress report for the period ending 31 March 26. So I invite elected member to move this motion. Moved by Councillor Alderman Zuko. Seconded, seconder required. Any questions or any debate or discussion or questions on this matter? Councillor Dutta.
Just 2 questions for clarification and to see where things are. The first one is Action 19, reference 5.2.2 with regards to Collins Street. How are things going? Because there are some complaints given to me by some ratepayers. I just want to know how are things going.
Through the Chair, while it did seem like things were paused for no good reason, we have had to wait for the concrete to cure, particularly on the bus border. So once that's cured, we will be able to complete the works. So is there anything you heard to say?
No, not really. I think it's going along about how we actually expect it to go along in that particular location. So we're pleased with the progress and stuff.
Thank you. And the other one is, I think, Action 43 with regards to rates. Now, in the present climate, I'm just wondering if there's something we could think about when we look at our rates. That's all. I'm just putting that, to the meeting. Considering the prices of oil and other ways that the ratepayers are impacted in our municipality. If we could later, when we come to it,
So that, I think I haven't got the attachment in front of me, but you're relating to the rates review, that,
Yeah,
that's
so the rates are when we're going to review it.
yeah.
As to how much we're charging, 3%, 4, 5 or whatever.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's part of the rating strategy, mid-term review, which is coming to the next council workshop, whenever the date of that is, for the council to work through it, so you can raise it during that debate.
Thank you.
Councillor Harvey?
Yes, thank you, Chair. A couple of points I'd like to make with items number 22 and 23, and this relates to something that's happening across the road already at St David's Park, which is the removal of the 2 sequoia trees. So those trees, I understand, are 88 years old, and I think this could lead to should lead to a conversation about urban forestry. So those trees will be utilised within the city to create, I don't know, signature items of whatever it might be. But something that I've thought about for years is how do we incorporate urban forestry into the landscape here by putting trees in strategic locations that are designed to be cut down in 50 to 100 years to provide structural timbers for, the urban environment development of council things, rather than concrete steel into the future forever. And there's plenty of opportunities, and that's an example of something that we could do all over the place in the appropriate locations, is to plant trees with the expectations that between 50 and 100 years from now, those trees will be harvested, and it might be to the advantage of other trees if they're planted in a particular pattern, which means the trees removed at 50 years make it better for the trees that will be removed at 100 years, plus there's a rotation and a replacement of those trees as they're removed across time. So we get into a cycle of being able to produce a certain level of timber within our open spaces in Hobart. So I'd like that to be noted, that where are the opportunities to create not just an urban canopy, but an urban, I want to say the word viticulture, but I'm not sure what the word is for an urban forestry project. So for example, we had 10,000 trees planted throughout the landscape in Hobart that were designed to be strategically removed in 50 to 100 years, and that timber to be used as signature timber in council developments or private developments subject to sale of that timber on the market. So could that just be noted as something to be considered in the future of our tree canopy?
Sure. Yeah, thank you. Have you heard of any places around the globe that might have had such a scheme, which sounds fantastic to me?
I'm sure there would be examples, but I haven't researched it. I've obviously looked at urban forestry, but I can't recall any examples of where this has become a mainstay of any city anywhere, where they've said, well, okay, we want to have a plantation dispersed across the city that we can harvest in the next 50 to 100 years. So,
Yeah, we'll take that one on notice.
thank you.
Councillor...
Thank you, Chair. And then you go next if you like.
I'm just working around the table.
Yeah,
in this
no,
instance.
all good. I'm going to be really quick. Just on the urban tree strategy, I have been made aware that some of the issues are budgetary as to why the roads team are not excited about putting more trees into the road reserve rather than the footpath.
I don't. So sorry. Say again.
They're budgetary, so it's cheaper to put a tree in the footpath than it is to put it in the road, and that the roads team are pretty reluctant to facilitate more trees because of costs, a whole range of things. But I was also recently shown a photo of a tree that we planted in a footpath that resulted in the footpath being narrowed down to 600 mil, which is not wide enough for a wheelchair, in an existing footpath that was over 1 metre wide. And I think that it's a good opportunity to talk to that, given that it's part of the urban tree strategy, that in my view is not good enough to degrade our footpaths to 600 mil width because the tree can't be put in the road. Like, the tree shouldn't have gone in at all, but we can't be narrowing our footpaths to below compliance to facilitate a tree. So it's really, really disappointing to see that photo.
So is this a question or what? So
No,
we're
no,
relating to, so,
It's relating to the finalise the urban tree strategy, which
Yeah.
is listed as in progress and delayed.
yeah,
And
and so
this is-
you're referring to discussions with my staff about things, is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, and I've just had some discussions with staff about, because
That's not what my understanding is, so we probably need to take this offline and have a conversation, I think.
Sure.
Okay, councillor Logan.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I'm pretty happy with the item as it is. I just wanted to sort of comment on what Councillor Harvey was suggesting. It's an interesting idea. There was a lot of wood harvested after some big storms in Europe about 5 or 10 years ago. Like lots and lots of really big oaks in France got knocked down, and they did try to reuse all of that timber, but the trees weren't planted for that purpose. So I think what we've done with the sequoias is actually really good. That if we can reuse the timber, we should, but I'm not sure that we should be planting them with the idea of cutting them down again in 50 or 100 years.
Different concept. Sorry.
I'm sort of halfway there with you.
Yeah,
Councillor
look, we'll
Harvey,
take, yes,
along the way.
that's
Yeah.
fine, we'll take that on notice. Councillor Dutta, any comments? Councillor Elliott? Alderman Bloomfield? Alderman Zuko? No, I mean, I've often heard the saying, you know, whenever you have a child, plant 2 trees and that's enough. Once they get old enough to build a house, there's enough timber in the trees to build a house, which sounds fantastic and very utopian, I guess, but it's, I don't mind some of that idea, and it's something that could be fleshed out, I think.
And we're not going to plant them on the nature strips.
No.
I'm talking about in locations where we could identify opportunity to put in trees of a particular species that will
Sure.
be valuable in the future. Like an 80-year-old blackwood would probably be worth a couple of $100,000, and in the future it'd probably be a couple of $1 million.
It's great for dignitaries to do such thing in St David's Park or Government House lawns or something too, you know.
And they're ceremonial trees.
Yeah, but that could be tied in with that, I guess, stepping something for the future. So yes, there's no further comments. I'll ask, I'll put that motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Motion carried. Item 6.2, consultation, plumbing approval process reform discussion paper. I'd advise we can never move this motion. Councillor Loberger, thank you. Any discussion on debate, starting with Alderman Zuko moving around the table, Alderman Bloomfield, Councillor Elliott.
Yes, please. So when is this submission due to the state government? When do we have to give it to them by? Thanks.
CEO, or through, I've got Karen and Kirsten, thank you.
Thank you. It was due today. We've got an extension of time of 1 day until tomorrow.
And I will admit I haven't read every word. We've only put, it's officers, in terms of consultation or input, it's only been from officer feedback?
That's correct.
Yeah. And master plumbers would be getting their own opportunity?
Yes, it was, consultation is sought from members of the public.
Yeah.
And it was sent to all the councils, all the industry bodies in the normal way.
Yeah. And can you tell us, can you just summarise for us what the government's recommending and where the council's submission diverges from that? Because just before we started this, we had a briefing and Ms Avey talked us through some of the high-level detail and said overall we're supportive of the concept of more self-sufficiency in the plumbing section, but can you tell us what the government's proposing and anything we're disagreeing with?
Yeah, certainly. So what they're proposing is a fast track for residential, so standalone Class 1A, which is your housing, that is connected to sewer, that doesn't rely on any performance solution but for reactive soils. So it's your everything that meets the National Construction Code. They're giving the powers to your licensed plumbers to certify that work, and at 2-day turnaround times the council will verify, and we're not really sure what the verification checks are, and that is one of the submissions, as we need more clarity on what you're actually expecting from a verification side. But that is in a nutshell. So certification by plumbers of standalone residential.
Okay. Everything else like commercial mixed up would remain with the council.
That's correct.
The checks.
And they also recommend that council retain inspections of that work. So it is only the front end permit that the plumber will actually be able to certify.
Even with residential?
Yeah. With this proposal, it is only really the permit, the the paperwork that the plumber would self-certify, they are still recommending that council retain the inspections.
Okay, all right. And when you look at construction, separate external to the organisation, building surveyors do all of those different checks, don't they?
That's correct.
So in terms of how much the plumbing process would mirror the building process, it's really only that first port of call that would be dropped away.
That's correct, for a very small portion of the work.
Okay. And you said that they would need to come to council if they relied on performance criteria.
That's correct.
What ballpark, can you give us an idea of what sort of percentage of plumbing applications we receive fall within the acceptable, the standard, I can't remember the word, but the...
Deemed to satisfy?
Yeah, basically it's compliant because of, it doesn't rely, what percentage relies on a performance aspect, do you reckon?
I'd have to take that one on notice, because I wouldn't have the breakdown with commercial and
But in residential?
I don't know.
All right. I'm just trying to get an idea around how much would actually be leaving council, given it's just residential and just the acceptable solution for them
I
to
suspect
comply.
this council, probably not many, because there is a lot of performance solution for our sites because of the nature of the sites. In a greenfield subdivision where you've got a flat site with all new services, more likely to be
Or within, because you're building fresh.
deemed to satisfy, but where you're doing infill or you're developing tricky sites, it is more likely to have a performance solution.
And very layperson question, why would the government not be representing just a mirror of the building construction, building inspector system?
I can't speak for that, but I suspect because of industry capability.
And I did notice in the submission we talk about a lot of the hold-up and problems related to inaccurate and incomplete paperwork. And I know we talked about this when we were talking about plumbing a while back. What action has there been in terms of the officers working with master plumbers and then master plumbers communicating, or officers giving feedback to plumbers themselves? What movement have we seen in terms of building that capability so that people are able to get the complete paperwork in?
So we're encouraging CBOS to drive uplift in industry because they really need to be doing that. But the way that we're doing it internally is we have changed the way, and I think we spoke about this, we've changed the way that we're actually assessing applications. So we triage when it first comes in, and then rather than just sending a paper RTI saying what's wrong, the person who triages that, we've got one plumber currently doing it, he will actually ring the designer and talk them through it and talk to them about what's required. So giving that verbal feedback so they can be a two-way conversation rather than just here's a letter with setting out with you.
Okay. And just one final thing, so is it fair for me to summarise then that we're not really, for what the government's putting forward, we're pretty much agreeing with the bulk of it, maybe with just some, with a message of let's not go too far because of this risk?
No, we certainly support what's proposed, but we're saying uplift in industry is definitely required. One of the major concerns from an operational perspective is what if the plumber self-certifies and they get it wrong, and then we go out on site and there's suddenly we've got a dispute between council and the self-certifying plumber. One of the other major concerns is from our stormwater team. We currently assess your UDA and your stormwater requirements through a plumbing permit so that it's kind of a one-stop shop. If they've got a 2-day verification process, we won't be able to do that. So we will have to have a separate UDA process. So that completely undermines the whole purpose of the reform to make it quicker. It in fact wouldn't make it quicker. So we're just saying to the government, here are some risks that we see might arise from what you're proposing, and you really need to seriously consider that.
Yeah. Have the government made any changes with Plan Build in terms of the user friendliness?
They're certainly working on a series of improvements, and we've seen some roll out, but there's a list that we've just recently prioritised, and they're working through that.
But you are in communication, they're somewhat responsive at least.
Yeah, absolutely.
And final question, I promise. I know it's not our role, but my conscience is telling me I need to make sure that master plumbers are aware of this, and I'm sure they are, but is there any way any of our officers can chat and make sure that they are putting in a submission and aware of this?
Yeah, I'll give them a call.
That'd be great, thanks.
Councillor Dutton?
No, not at this stage. I'll come back when I've heard.
Councillor Oberger?
Thank you, Chair. Just quickly, really support the uplift of the training in the industry. I think that's going to be critical. I think if we are talking to plumbers, how much do they want this? I mean, they'll get out of some compliance activities, I guess, but they've got to do them themselves, and there's going to be a lot of time and training involved. So I do wonder if they're kind of aware of what the pros and the cons are for them. I guess that's their decision. But yeah, look, my main feedback is, that we really want to strongly push that need to really make sure they know what they're doing and to try to help them as much as possible, I guess, in the industry to get that training. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Postle?
Thanks, Chair. So I heard you mention the UDA. Is there any reason why plumbers couldn't self-certify UDA? I know that's not what is the submission or not what's being proposed, but...
So the way that the UDA is set up, that we are a stormwater service provider, and even under the Building Act, we're can't remember the words, but in a sense, the stormwater entity is a bit like Taswater, although it's internal.
Yep.
It does have separate powers. So it's about protecting the public infrastructure, the UDA, rather than the private infrastructure. So it would be a slippery slope if we suddenly let plumbers certify works to council names and the like.
Right, so if you're plugging any stormwater into the system, a council inspector needs to go to site?
No, you just need an approval from the stormwater regulator, which is council.
Right, okay, so even if it's like just a residential extension, you still need approval to plumb the roof into the stormwater?
That's correct, yes.
And is there, I understand your answer, but is there any reason why the legislation couldn't be changed to allow such a simple stormwater project? Like, it's different for a big commercial building, but if you're just building a small extension on the back of the house, one plumber can't sign off on it, subject to spot compliance checks, for example, and fines if they do the wrong thing.
I think, and Karen might be able to assist further here, but the concern there would be because you're only looking at one individual development, and when council does it, we're looking at everything that's looking into the main. So it's fine to say, well, that one development might not have a change, but if you're approving 10 of those and all of a sudden the capacity of the main is no longer big enough because you've approved 10 connections to the main, then that would be problematic. So it's a more holistic view that we're looking at from the council perspective and the infrastructure and the impact on our infrastructure.
Yeah, thanks. The final comment from me, Chair. I feel, and I mentioned this previously when we were workshopping it, but I think it's good to have it on this record. I feel like a lot of what we do isn't necessary, and I know it's not the council, I understand it's the legislation that is requiring us to do and behave in certain ways as the regulator. But, you know, it's really funny when you provide parallels. For example, the gas lines in a hospital are checked and signed off by anaesthetists, and if they get it wrong, they go to jail. It's not signed off by some statutory body. So there's lots of, I mean, that's direct plumbing. If they stuff up the oxygen and the nitrous oxide lines and they're opposites and they don't check them properly, the anaesthetist is liable personally. So if we're willing to let individuals sign off on things in tertiary hospitals, I don't really understand why I need to have a plumbing inspector come and check a vanity plumbing when, like, it's just taking the autonomy away. No wonder the profession has such low capacity if you're not allowed to build a vanity without having it checked first. You could be a plumber for 40 years and you still have to have a statutory inspection by council. So I still don't feel like this is far enough from the government. I'd prefer to see even more of the responsibility handed over to the professionals that do the job. Thank you.
Councillor Sherlock, I'm just working around the table. Any comments at this moment? Councillor Harvey?
Look, this is possibly another tangent, but it's a good tangent, if I do say so myself. And that's to do with plumbing and water-sensitive urban design, because I know we talk about water-sensitive urban, some of us talk about urban-sensitive water design regularly, about how we don't do it, mostly. And it's a really important component of how we support our other strategies, such as nature strip gardening, such as street tree strategy, such as flood mitigation at a small scale, not major floods. All bets are off with those. But it's not something that ever gets included in anything else. So here we are talking about plumbing, and as Councillor Purcell said, you know, you can sign off your own roof, connecting it to the stormwater, but we're always connecting everything to the stormwater, which takes it to the street, which then takes it to the drain, or the river, and it runs away. We never talk about how we've got standards that say, is there an opportunity for water sensitive urban design, because we all talk about it endlessly but never do anything. So is there anything in this that covers off on what I'm rambling on about?
No.
Okay. So here we are again, where there's something that's really desirable for the resilience of the city and supporting our tree canopy and supporting da-da-da-da-da-da-da. But there's nothing here. And nothing's going to happen here, but how do we ever put this into the debates about how we create a resilient city when it comes to watering our trees naturally?
So we can respond to the issue, Chair, in terms of take that one on notice, because what we're responding to is the discussion paper that's, and so it's not part of what the remit of that discussion paper, but I take your point, and in terms of the actual council process and considerations around that, we can certainly take that on notice and come back to you, but not as it relates to this discussion paper.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Because the last item did have a sentence about an exemplar of water sensitive urban design. I think there was something there.
Yeah.
But I just want to raise it
Yeah,
constantly for the rest of my life.
We'll capture it.
Yeah,
And
okay.
we will respond to it.
Alderman Zuko.
Yeah, look, under the building code, these changes come into play that up to $5,000 builders can practically self-regulate, correct or incorrect? So that's the whole thing. So you've got a builder that can self-regulate under the building code because of a dollar factor, which is only minor. And these days, $5,000 is actually peanuts, to honestly tell you. Why not have it that plumbers that are registered with the Hobart, registered with local councils, in other words, they must register to self-regulate, all right? Up to X amount of dollars work. Now, I think 5,000's behind, I think it should be at least 10 grand, because 5,000 doesn't buy anything these days. I get a lot of plumbers contacting me. I'm sort of over it. I just sort of say, look, mate, I'm done, because to be honest with you, it is very frustrating, especially when you get different plumbers give you different feedback. From the person I was working with only works part-time and I can't get that person today and I need them today. I'm getting at, I think Councillor Passol's got a point, but it's relative to the building code. So why don't we add that into our submission, that plumbers that are registered with local councils, in other words, they must be registered with us, ticked off as a, not a Harvey plumber, because he's not a registered plumber, but those plumbers that are registered can get minimal works done up to $10,000. That's not doing a subdivision. That's not changing the whole nature of what's going into our water systems. It's actually doing some works in a house that may require an upgrade to a bathroom, an upgrade to a toilet, and things like that. I think we should think outside the square, and the building code has done it, but I think it's behind the 8 ball now. So maybe in our submission here, we should be looking at how we can streamline the system, right, and have that sort of self-regulation, but for registered people. In other words, no plumber can just walk into the City of Hobart and do it. They must be registered with us. So they can notify the council to say, I'm doing these works at 364A Elizabeth Street, North Hobart. These are the works I've just done, and send the plan off to and they self-regulate.
That process already exists under the Building Act.
Under the Building Act, yes.
So the process for plumbing and building is mirrored in that respect.
Yeah.
So we have 4 categories of both plumbing and building work. So there's low risk that can be done by an authorised or a licensed plumber for plumbing. There's a licensed builder for builder. There's low risk category 2, which is you can do it but you have to notify council, and then it goes into the third category where you need a permit. So that already exists for plumbing as well as for
Yeah,
building.
but $5,000 work these days is
It's not, neither of them have that
no
set
caps.
limit.
Yeah.
It is about whether or not you fall into the
So-
category.
So what's the maximum work a plumber can do without having to seek a permit?
That'd be category, low risk category 2.
And what's that?
And there's a whole long list of things, so you can do, you can change all your fixes, tapware and equipment, you can do sanitary plumbing.
What about putting a new toilet into an ensuite that has, I'm getting there, don't worry. What about putting a new toilet into an ensuite that doesn't have a toilet but has everything else?
If you're putting in new fixtures, you do need
And that's the point.
notifiable. It's not a permit, but it's notifiable.
So they can do that. So a plumber can go and put a new toilet in without seeking a permit.
You're testing my memory here, and I'm just checking it for you. I don't believe you can put in a new fixture.
Okay.
I believe you need
All right.
approval from council.
So I need to put in a permit to put a new toilet into my house that's got, say, 2 toilets, and I want to put the third one there, right? Tapping into my same sewer on my property, right? Okay. So I've got to get a permit for that, and I'll get the permit. And this is the point I'm getting at, right? To me, a toilet is minimal work in a household. Absolute minimal work, right? Or putting in a new sink or a new hand basin, right? So we've got to start really thinking about, do we need to go through these processes? If the plumber needs to cut into the roadway of an existing property or do something else, I can understand it. If it's an empty block of land, I can understand it. But when you've got something that's established, that they want to put in 1 extra toilet, I'm not talking about putting in 6 extra toilets or 6 extra things. They want to put in 1 extra toilet, 1 extra hand basin, 1 extra sink. I think let's come up with a solution that makes life simpler. Honestly.
So this reform would essentially capture those in the residential setting?
No, it's just standalone.
Well, why don't we put in our submission to say let's make plumbing simpler for registered plumbers that are registered with local authorities. Very similar to the people that can go and do things, right, and sign off. Now, to my point of view, most professionals in the game, whether they're a plumber or a builder and all that, they risk losing their licences. I'm not talking about the shoddy ones. We don't want the shoddy ones, and you cop them. But if they're registered with the local authority, think about it. Think if you can do it within 24 hours. Think about throwing something into the mix that can make life easier, not only for myself as a property owner, for our staff who are sitting there going, right, I've got to go through this application, I've got to get this permit, right, and Marty Zuko wants to put a toilet into his backyard.
Okay, thanks,
Okay.
Councillor Zuko. Anyone else?
Alderman Zuko to you, sir.
Alderman Zuko to you.
Yeah.
Councillor Dutta.
Just with regards to my understanding of this, so we have a fast track which we support, and I think that's pretty good. Secondly, that individuals, regardless of their capacity and ability, are able to issue these certification individually. And the council, point number 3, that council still has the responsibility for inspection, compliance, etc. Now, what about the fees and the cost for all this? Do we bear the cost of that, or is it? How does it work when it comes to the economic aspect from the council paying for this or not paying?
Well, obviously that's not set by the reform, but it would be governed by our fees and charges, and if we're offering a service, which would be undertaking the inspection, we'd be entitled to set a fee for that.
All right, so that becomes our responsibility. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. I just wondered, because I know we're signing off on a submission tonight and these things get complicated because we haven't really fully workshopped it until just before this workshop. Will the comments that are being said be reflected in the submission, or do we need to actually amend, put something in an amendment to be voted on? Because I think there's sentiment, my read is that there's sentiment around the table that they should be broader than what the government's proposing and not just apply to new builds. That's just my read of the room, I might be reading it incorrectly. So, yeah, will things be, additions be made to the submission, or do we need to amend it?
Look, I understand the points that are being made. There are considerations that need to be taken into account in each of those in respect to, I guess there's a broad theme. We can amend it to include the theming towards this. So there's a lot of thinking that needs to be happening. Even the scenarios that were outlined, there's still other things that you need to consider that might be beyond the obvious. But in terms of the intention, we can certainly reflect that in what we've heard.
Just a quick question related to that, that's all right.
Just coming around the table again, I'll come back a sec.
Okay, sorry.
Over there. So, over to you, Councillor Riley.
Okay. So just in that, is this something where the government's like, okay, speak now, forever hold your peace, and then we're going to change the rules and that'll be the new rules for 5 years? Or is it something that council could, in 6 months' time, write a letter and say, we think you should do this, and they might be open to listening?
My discussions with CBOS, this is considered a first step. So let's roll this out, see how it goes, and then if it's successful, then we will look at further.
The normal, so there'll be a discussion paper, all of the submissions will come in, and then they'll put a proposal out to the councils. You'll be able to see what they're proposing, which is again another opportunity to go, well, you haven't quite got it right, we don't think, so you will have other opportunities.
On that basis, I do think, along with Councillor Purcell's sort of vein as well, it can't hurt to put a paragraph in that we are open to discussing more about self-sufficiency.
We'll amend take that as part of the motion in terms of this, and we'll word something around what Alderman Zuko was saying.
That we're open to hearing more.
Great.
Thank
And
you.
still meet the deadline.
Well, it has to be done tonight or tomorrow, so, yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. I'd just like to make the comment that, look, it is complicated, this whole plumbing issue stuff, and what might seem simple in some cases, it can get super complicated, and as I said in the meeting we were just having beforehand, if something's going to go wrong, plumbing can go wrong. I think that there's been a lot of stuff over the last 100 years, the classic being, stormwater into sewage lines and the problems and costs that causes. Council around Australia is just phenomenal, just that sort of thing. Other people inheriting pipes that will crack under concrete slabs, for instance, might be good for 10 years, but if something's going to go wrong with plumbing, it's major, and a lot of the problems can be buried for years. So I can understand that. That being said, I agree with the sentiment here. Any way of streamlining the whole system, it's got to be a good thing. And I think that's probably a way of encapsulating it, more streamlining can be done. I can't understand how, as far as final sign-offs go, we have engineers sign off for us, for structures and all that stuff, but for the plumbing, we've got to have our man hop in our council van, run out there, look at it, do all the paperwork and all that. To me, the more we can divest ourselves of, work that others can do in this area, and we already have them doing it in other fields of building work and sign-offs, the better that is. We've got so much on our plate, administratively wise, with the rest of the whole plumbing world, that any area we can farm that out, the better. So, all right, thanks for that discussion on the plumbing. It's good to see. And going back to Councillor Harvey's, which is something for a bigger discussion, the idea that Bill's brought up before, of these urban areas where stormwater can go into ponds and there's bird life and all that. It's a much bigger discussion, not applicable for tonight, but does tie in with the complex world of plumbing. We move on now to item number 7. Items. Oh yes, sorry. Yeah. So I'd ask put that motion now. All those in favour? Against? Declare the motion passed. We move on to item 7, items for workshopping. Thank you, Karen and Kirsten, for that. items for workshopping, remembering that this portion of the meeting, it's no decisions have been made here, so more discussion. And to that end, 7.1, waste management strategy implementation plan. We've got a progress update. We'll invite the manager of city resources and the director of infrastructure and assets to introduce the item and make the presentation. Thank you.
Just while Chris is just getting set up, I might just give a brief introduction. So we've obviously been doing a lot of work in the waste space for a period of time. So this is just an opportunity to have a little bit of an update for elected members, because I guess this is your first update on where we've got since we put the waste management strategy to council. So Chris has put a little bit together there to go through. So I encourage you to ask any questions on the way through there, and I guess that's going to be helpful for us actually moving forward as well at the same time. So I'll hand over to you, Chris.
Thanks, David. Thanks everybody for welcoming me today. I'm Christopher Kashinki. I'm the manager of City Resilience, and one of the functions I manage is waste and circular economy. So I'm here today just to give you a bit of a 6-monthly update of the implementation of the new waste strategy, which was endorsed in the second half of last year. So to kick things off, apologies. The last year, as part of the new waste strategy, the council reset the target of zero waste to landfill by 2030 to an 85% reduction in residual waste, irrespective of the landfill destination of the waste. In other words, if we divert, it's still, the onus is still on us to improve the sorting and recovery of material from that residual waste. Just as a definition, I'm going to use the word residual waste quite a bit today. Residual waste is the waste that's left over from material we receive after we've sorted. It's the component that goes to landfill. So today's talk I've split into the areas that we've actually constructed into a new implementation plan to execute the strategy. And those areas are Macrobies Gully Transition Program, System and Service Optimisation, Governance, Funding and Advocacy, Waste Avoidance and Behaviour, and Recycling and Market Development. So, Macrobies Gully Transition Program. Under the 2015 the previous waste strategy, which was 2015, there was an action to close the Macrobies Gully landfill by 2030, and council endorsed that strategy, which by default endorses that action. Governed by that action, the waste can be divided into two separate residual waste streams. Again, residual is what's going to landfill. It's the commercial bulk loads that we currently receive at the Macrobies Gully Waste Management Centre, which is the component that we would need to divert if we were to close that landfill. And in order to maintain the service to the community of receiving waste for the single axle vehicles and trailers, we would continue to receive the smaller component of the residual waste, which we would still need to sort and manage. It would have leftover residual waste from that component, from the small guys, that we would still need to also divert at cost to the council. So, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about both of those areas in a minute. But essentially, for item 1, it's a simple diversion and we would wear the cost, but we would also have to advocate to where we're sending it to. And as part of that process, we've had a consultant recently complete a landfill options analysis for us, giving us what those best options are, what it looks like in terms, not just transport and the gate fees, but also other issues around their future expenditure on waste sorting and recovery, their compliance with the EPA of their landfills, their gas emissions, etc. So the options literally does a risk, likelihood and consequence matrix of all those potential landfills, considering all those options, not just the cost. For the second part, in order to continue to receive to deliver the service for the smaller guys at Macrobies, we would need to improve our waste sorting, recycling and recovery at Macrobies from what's existing. So I'm going to talk a little bit about more of that shortly. We also need to consider site rehabilitation. We've already commenced that work. For example, we've instigated a new capping monitoring plan guided by EPA compliance. We're also looking at other land use options around, for example, energy at the site, the potential to relocate our nursery. At the moment, it's just the options to see if it can actually be done. And of particular importance is we've used consultants plus internal resources to undertake fairly comprehensive landfill gas and emissions investigations, because we're particularly interested in, given the current residual waste and future options of diversion, of what that emission will look like into the future. Now, delving into the detail of the Macrobies Gully transition, these are just the options areas that we're looking at and investigating. So we have a current transfer station which is at the moment only handling the little guys. We're diverting all our bulk and commercial residual waste direct to our landfill. So, assuming we close by 2030, our transfer station would still be used as is. What needs to improve is the sorting prior to going to the transfer station and compacting for movement to the landfill that we choose under our options analysis. We're looking at options around reuse, repair and recycling in terms of the sorting shed and what kind of infrastructure we need for that. We've looked at Albury, we've looked at Launceston, we've looked at Darlington, and we don't need to reinvent the wheel here. What we do need is some sort of statewide normalisation of waste categories. So if we're going to bring in a consultant for that, we'd want them to at least give us some advice on the waste stream configuration of what improved sorting at Macrobies would look like. I've already mentioned the nursery. I think the nursery would be a neat fit for Macrobies. Again, we're just looking at the options. There's no decisions made. It'll be the councils that will be making that decision. But we just want to see if we could relocate, where we would put it. Our biggest consideration there is room. Our second biggest consideration is irrigation. We're looking at options around solar. The one issue with solar, particularly if we're going to get LMS, who's our gas contractor, to come in, they've already said the site's not big enough to make it worthwhile to produce electricity, but it potentially is if we put GAT batteries in series in the circuit and can actually store on site prior to transmittance of that of that storage to the network. What isn't a problem is blockage of the sun. Again, it's actually just the size of the site and the efficiency of the setup.
The same again. Knock Lofty's not an issue with sun penetration.
No, it's not. Mm-hmm. No, it's not, because 90% of your daily UV is sun angles that are way higher than the sky view blockage at Macrobies.
Okay, good.
Yeah. So we're looking at the gas emissions infrastructure into the future. Again, that's going to be tight. Solar and gas can both be used for electricity conversion. Again, you need those batteries though, I think, because the surface area of the site's just not big enough. For gas emissions infrastructure, as I was mentioned, we've got some work to do with LMS still for the future, and we're still using them under our existing contract to 2034 to best capture as much gas as we can. Our current capture rate is, by national standards, very high. It's around 70%, confirmed by the contract and by independent consultants modelling. So nationally, Macrobies is doing a good job with its both its gas capture and the national standard of the percentage capture rate. The Hobart, being the central council, would be a good location for a regional education facility for waste. So that's something we're also considering as an option, speaking with our regional partners, in particular Tas Waste South. And then, of course, there's the potential for retail space at Macrobies and what that could look like. So we're just exploring all these options at the moment, and we'll put all these together in a paper where we'll tick off the highest return items first. But essentially, our vision for the site is when you come in, to make it seamless, a good visual experience, and make it seamless and logical in terms of depositing material and moving through the site, as it should be, particularly given that we're the capital city council. I've just throwing in a few slides here. These are from Albury. This is what a waste sorting shed looks like. This is at Albury, which actually is sized for 7 regional councils, but the categories are the same and the configuration and layout would be the same. This is a potential for something that we could have at Macrobies Gully. What's advantageous with the Albury setup is that your resource and recovery centre, i.e. your tip shop, is physically connected to the building where you receive the waste. So the shop is right next door. And that's a problem that the current setup at Macrobies, where the current tip shop is, doesn't have room to physically connect to the sorting shed next door, so that's something we're looking into. Again, from Albury, this is LMS's solar farm. LMS are the main contractor for all landfills in Australia for solar panels and energy. And Albury has an education centre for the region, which we've done some tours through there. You were with us, Bill, these photos. Very impressive. If you want, particularly for ingraining waste material circularity with young children into the future. I mean, they're going to be the managers of the community in the future, so it starts very early and you bring schools through, all the community. There's a lot you can tie in with an education centre with waste. A little bit more detail. These are our most important streams at Macrobies that we need to handle today and into the future. Again, we've done the landfill options analysis for the bulk and commercial residual waste, which second row there, waste disposal, I've got 17,500 tonnes that we're currently receiving a year at Macrobies. 14,500 is that bulk commercial. If we were to close the site, we need to divert that. If we divert that, it's no longer a gate-free profit. It's a cost of the transport to the other site plus the gate fees. So we're looking at technical investigations now of that, going through all those landfill options. The 2,900 connected to that is the small single axle vehicles and trailers. If Macrobies is closed, that volume stays and we need to manage it. And if there's any residual waste left over from that, we've then got to pay to transport that to the landfill of choice under that landfill options analysis. Currently, Macrobies takes last year 61,000 tonnes of clean fill. It's highly profitable. There's high demand for it, particularly because of all the projects in the City of Hobart. Jackson Street takes very little commercial levels of clean fill. Most of it ends up with us or down at Copping. So I think we need to further investigate options analysis around the clean fill and what we want to do with that. But if we close Macrobies, all that clean fill and the profit associated with it also will end up elsewhere. The green waste from Macrobies now, this is not to be confused with our curbside. This is the current 4,500 tonnes of green waste we receive at Macrobies. The options we're currently going through, looking at all the concepts, I think it would be smart to retain that as a service because it's the little guys bring a lot of green waste to us. So we're looking at options to potentially close our windrows. So advocating the other contractors in southern Tasmania to build an in-vessel facility to potentially take green waste and process it. And what we do around the sales, whether we then continue to produce compost from that and what that sales looks like in terms of circularity. The recycling, reuse and circularity sorting hub, I've already mentioned that. We're assessing costs and the effectiveness of that. We've got some concepts around costing and sizing already done. we're looking at that and the potential location for it at Macrobies. And what we need to do there now, though, is compare that with just maintaining our existing transfer station and in just improving the sorting around that. Because a shed of that size can cost to the tune of $6 to $8 million just to process 3,000 tonnes. Embedded in the residual waste, that 17,500 tonnes, is approximately 20 to 30% of the construction and demolition material. That portion is fairly similar whether it's in the bulk 14,500 tonnes or the little guys, the 2,900 tonnes. So regardless of whether we divert or not, again, if we divert, the potential to maximise profit from C&D is lost if we divert the commercial and bulk, but we still have the potential to draw that material from the little guys, from the 2,900 tonnes. There is still going to be concrete, steel and timber in that portion for us to draw on. So we would still need to have some material capture and processing for concrete, steel and timber at Macrobies, whether we assuming we close the site. Lastly is our curbside FOGO material stream, currently around 4,500 to 5,000 tonnes a year. That's the FOGO bins. We're coming up to a new contract renewal for that, so we're investigating potential options for that. At this point in time, it's looking like it's only Southern Waste Solutions at Copping or the new owners of Pure and Living Soil in Interlaken. So the analysis and modelling of these options will be presented to Council shortly in a few months. We'll literally step through these and come up with options for you guys to make a decision on. Now I just want to look into these other supporting areas that we've been working on since the introduction of the new waste management strategy. System and service optimisation is critical, particularly because we're managing a lot of data and we're required to do a lot of reporting under our landfill permit at Macrobies. The EPA and NRE got a bit of a tap on the shoulders recently from the State Audit Office in terms of their requirement to do a better job regulating landfills. As part of that, there's been a ramp up in the EPA compliance of the Macrobies Waste Management Centre. So we've had to bring online extra staff and resources to make sure that we're meeting those compliance objectives with the EPA. In particular, the monitoring management and the emergency management of the site. We've implemented improved emergency management and preparedness at Macrobies for all our major hazards. That has required that our broad emergency management hazard action plans include Macrobies in the communications and capability for those three hazards. We've, at some cost and considerable work, we've made improvements to the ground and surface water quality monitoring of Macrobies. In particular, the focus has been on separating the potential contamination signal of the Macrobies rivulet from the Hobart rivulet. And to do that, we had to introduce 2 new ground water monitoring bores last year. We've got new data systems for in-house waste stream tracking, bin maintenance tracking and financial monitoring of recyclers. Prior to the last 12 months, every time we wanted to sort of get a handle on that stuff, we had to bring in a consultant at high cost. We now have the ability to do that in-house. We've got a new capping monitoring plan as part of our EPA permit, which is the critical part. It's the landfill part of the total rehabilitation plan for Macrobies. We've recently completed landfill gas measurements and modelling. Landfill gas measurements are now complemented with modelling at Macrobies, so we can get a future handle of what the current waste is. The future handle on the gas emissions at the site. What the results are showing is that we're getting quite a steep decay of emissions into the future of Macrobies from the waste from the last 5 years. Why I mentioned 5 years is because after about 5 years, methane decay is quite high. It's really the last 5 to 10 years of waste that you put into the system that contributes 9% of the future methane emissions. We're doing quite considerable work at the moment about improving our waste collections, particularly on the route analysis. Have we got the right mix of trucks for all the one-way streets and dead ends and narrow streets in Hobart? And we've also implemented a new community compliments and reporting system in-house. So now a bit of discussion about governance, funding and advocacy. All the councils in collaboration with Tasway South have just drafted a Southern Regional Waste Infrastructure Plan. Why this is important is because none of the councils alone have high enough waste volume to make large-scale disposal affordable. But if we can work together and commingle our waste, particularly our organics, then those $10 to $14, $15 million facilities start to become viable. It's not something that the City of Hobart can do alone with the low relative volume of our waste. The last 12 months, the region has brought together a Southern Tas Organics working group. Again, we've currently got about 25,000 tonnes of organics in the south, with the potential to pull out another 10 to 15,000 from the councils, excluding Taswater biosolids. So it's quite critical that we advocate and lobby just for 1 or 2 facilities in the south in Vessel for the processing of organics. We've recently applied for several grants, a $50,000 data ready grant for internal IT oversight of and quality control and assurance of our waste data. We've applied for a $30,000 paddock to plate, also grant for hospitality, food waste circularity education. We're currently involved with our neighbour councils on a soft plastics drop-off trial at Macrobies, I think for 4,500 tonnes. I won't go into the costs at the moment. For 4,500 tonnes, it's cost us $14,000 already, which is unacceptable. Clarence is in a worse position. We've got that much soft plastics coming in and growing. What we need is discussions with...
You say 4,500 tonnes of soft plastics?
4.5 tonnes.
Sorry, 4.5 tonne. Yeah, that's why I didn't want to mention it. It's 4.5 tonne, but the $14,000 is correct. We need to lobby regionally with Tasway South and the Waste Board to assist us here to help how we, as a region, move forward with our soft plastics. It's important that we can get it out of the waste stream. Obviously, by volume, it's not one of our major recyclers, but it's just it's problematic. I mean, as we know, the cost to manufacture new plastic bags is cheaper than the recycling of those soft plastics. And again, another issue that's, because it's shared across councils, is community education on waste avoidance. I throw that one in there because it's true that $1 spent on waste avoidance, not allowing the commingling of the waste in the first place, saves us $10 in recovery and recycling down the track. Waste avoidance and behaviour change. So at the moment, Rethink Waste has ramped up its resources statewide for education targeted at schools and the community. It was anticipated that they would assist us regionally, but they're not. So we have to decide as a group of councils, do we want to go it alone with our community education? It's critical, given the 50%, for example, contamination of organics in our red bins, that we tell the community or assist them on reducing the contamination of, particularly of the organics in those bins. It's not so problematic for the other bins, but it is for the organics in the red bin. We currently do audits of our bins every 18 months as our measure moving forward so that we can test are we improving. I'm not going to do an audit tomorrow because we haven't done that communication with the community. TV, radio, media, whatever it takes. Us as a group of councils need to do that. And if Rethink can't help us, which at this stage they're not, then that's because the southern region, we're going to have to do it ourselves. We have ramped up our South Hobart community engagement via the Good Neighbour Agreement. We meet quarterly on site and update them on our Macrobies transition, plus pollution activities and actions to mitigate those pollution activities. We're currently participating in a Flammable 5 industry-led state government education campaign.
So batteries?
Yeah, batteries is one of them. It's the main one, lithium batteries. So it's $200,000. We didn't do this with Rethink. We did it ourselves. And they pulled City of Hobart into that, and we're part of that, investigating that. So the last of the 5 areas I just want to quickly go into is we take all of our recyclates in the City of Hobart. Sure, the bulk of it sits in concrete, steel and timber. They're our big dollar items when you take the volume and the potential return. But we're not just a profit-driven organisation. We have to provide the services to the community. So we're also looking at the circularity in these other areas as well. Globes, gas bottles, e-waste, motor oil and glass. Concrete and glass I put together. We're currently processing about 1,500 tonnes of concrete a year. Again, if we divert our commercial and bulk to copping, we will lose most of that, but we will still have some in our small guys to consider. So either way, concrete, steel and timber is something that we need to consider in terms of the volume, but also all these other items in terms of the service. They're really expensive and cost ineffective. And part of the reason for that is the end homes for some of these items. And the processing is expensive. So this is the last slide, just some next steps. Very soon we need to decide on which of these options will provide the best outcome for Hobart residents now and into the future. For that, we propose we come back with what those different options can look like for each of those different streams I presented in the earlier slide. We need to continue our plannings and decisions around the functional options for Macrobies, in particular the sorting of the smaller loads of material and its waste diversion, because that's not going to go away if we close the landfill. We need to explore the best model for a resource and recovery centre, re the tip shop, because at present some of our recyclates we're managing into circularity, some they are. We need to take the whole set, put them together and come up with an option paper which optimises the two together. And then that should then backfeed into what a future tip shop should look like. We need accelerated advocacy on regional organics processing, which I alluded to earlier, and construction and demolition waste processing, because that won't be an option. To put a processing facility for either of those two at Macrobies would mean that we are turning Macrobies into a large regional facility, which would be duplicating what Southern Waste are doing at Lutana right now. So that we're not proposing that as a future option for either of those two streams. And lastly, we do need funding for infrastructure upgrades at Macrobies, whether we close the site or not, the landfill. And we need, as alluded to earlier, future funding for regionally scaled community waste avoidance communications and programs. That's it. That's an update from the waste section. Thank you.
Oh, that's been great. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
We'll start from the left. That's the left-hand side of the table.
Left
to start, and we'll go around the table.
Okay.
Thank
Before
you,
we get to the
Councillor.
right. Okay. So, can we go back to the slide which had the 61,000 tonnes of clean fill, please?
how do I make that large? Screw. Make that. Yep.
So with clean fill, people pay to drop that off?
Yep.
What do they pay per tonne?
It's price on application.
Mm-hmm.
So the gate fee, because the majority of our clean fill is class 2 clean fill, so it's contaminated soil, so it's a controlled waste under MCAT.
Mm.
And so it's $250 a tonne under our gate fees, but for bulk loads of the order of 3,000 tonnes or more, it's currently about 125 a tonne.
Okay, and
For
what
the
do we do
large
with it? Do
loads.
we use that to cover the site? Or do we send it out again?
No, we can use class 2 as landform fill. We can't use it as final cover for capping,
Yeah.
but we can use it to sculpture our cells, our landfill.
So 21,000 tonnes at about $250 a tonne down to $100 a tonne, depending on the scale.
61.
So if you take 61,000, multiply that by, say, on average across the region, about $150 a tonne.
Okay, so waste disposal, 17,500. So that includes $100 gate fee plus $100 waste levy.
So 200 gate fee, 140 gate fee and 60 levy, yeah.
Okay, and the levy, the $60 levy goes out.
Goes off, so we're
Okay.
making about 140.
And green waste is about $100 a tonne.
Yeah,
coming in.
120. Yeah.
Okay, so potentially keeping the green waste at McGroby's,
Yep, which we think is an option.
but then sending the clean fill and the waste somewhere else. How reliant on the income from those two sources are we, as a council?
So we certainly think there are options with respect to clean fill. That's absolutely, I mean, we generate a fair bit as a council that we need to dispose of and manage. So that's something we will bring back for you to consider.
Where would it go if we didn't take it?
Well, it would be transported down to Copping is the most likely. So there's an argument to be said that for clean fill, us maintaining it coming to our site, given that it's obviously an inert product. So that's something we're playing with.
Just so I butt in here, there is a large amount that does go down to Casmati's site next to the airport. They're willing recipients of clean fill.
For free?
No, they charge. They
Mm.
charge.
Gee.
And
But hang on, what I'm getting at though is, it's an income for us.
yes,
So-
can I get that
All right,
price right?
let's come back to me.
61,000 tonne. How much? How many tonne? How much dollar
9
tonne per
million.
tonne?
It's $9 million.
$9 million.
So
Yeah.
I would say moving for the future, the average across all the different contractors down here in the south is about $150 a tonne for bulk loads.
But that's a significant revenue stream.
Yes,
right?
and
Hang on.
and it's more than that because it's approximately $25 a tonne to transport that from city projects to Copping versus $4 to McRoby's.
So, McGroby's, if it's, how much airspace or volume or area do we still have at McGroby's?
Significant.
900,000 cubic metres, so enough to go to about 2045 at current annual consistent rates of waste and clean fill receipt.
Right, so we've still got plenty of capacity to fill at McGroby's, but we're considering moving on from those potential income streams. What?
So we're going to present you options, Councillor Harvey, around that. And we're running all the numbers at the moment in respect of, so the council can understand what levers it can pull and what it doesn't need to pull and what directions we want to go.
Because there's another element to this as well, and that's the cost of transport.
Correct.
It's massive and it's always going to be high, and it's going to be higher into the future. So I'd love to see an analysis of how long McRoby's can continue to accept landfill, even though we've agreed to get out of there by 2030. If we did extend it to the end of the cycle, 2040, versus taking our landfill stuff to Copping or via Lutana to Copping. I'd love to see the analysis of all three options. Like we continue the landfill, we transport it to Lutana, and then it's sent to Copping, or we take it directly to Copping, and what the three...
Yeah, you're going to get exactly that.
Yeah, because I was wedded to getting out of the tip site, but now, you know, with the cost of things changing, I'm just looking at all those options to weigh up whether or not it's the smart thing to do is get out of the tip at this particular juncture.
So the EPA doesn't have the 2030 closure is nothing to do with the EPA. The EPA permit has
That's
a
us.
height, it's just us. The EPA, we have a height under the permit that we believe has another, 2026, another 20 years.
Right.
Without having to go back for another permit.
And designing everything into one space, like the recycling facilities, like we saw in Albury. At the moment, you've got a zigzag around the side up there. You drive through the gate, you weigh all your stuff that you're going to recycle, then you drop it off, and they're guesstimating how much percentage. You know, I don't know how it works, but you always end up paying for stuff that you're taking for recycling. And to have that circulated, I think we had some preliminary designs.
We do, mate. And
Yeah.
so we want to present a superior sort of customer experience when using our site, so that we are able to get as much out of landfill as possible, irrespective of where the landfill ends up. We need to provide a better customer experience and a better range of diversion of waste, which we currently don't provide.
Yeah, yep. The other, look, I'll have one go on soft plastics and then take it away from me. But the soft plastic stuff drives me insane because we're never going to solve that issue. And we went and visited the Soft Plastics Recovery Centre, where we give our $14,000 to empty in a couple of wheelie bins up at McRoby's. Nationally, we put onto the market about 1.2 million tonnes of soft plastics, and we've never ever recovered more than 9% for recycling. So that's trillions of pieces of plastic that go to landfill, get burnt, or end up floating around somewhere. So I don't think supporting these projects, the same as Red Cycle, was a good idea, because Red Cycle knew that they weren't going to solve anything, and that is warehoused tons of it, and it came back to bite them. This latest project is about us paying for the service to give the, well, not for us, but for the plastics industry to give the impression that they have a solution to soft plastics when they don't. There is no solution to soft plastics, and it will double over the next coming decades, the amount of plastics put into the industry, unless, of course, the oil crash, you know, helps to shut it down. But the plastics industry is also saying the cost of oil, the crisis now we're in, is increasing the cost of plastics. So maybe that will limit plastics. But the only real solution is upstream. And that means we've got to be harder with the regulatory requirements for soft plastics at a national level. And we can't let the national level get sidetracked by the global plastics treaty, which failed because the petrochemical states wouldn't agree to anything. So therefore, we need to have our own strategy as a nation to say we've got to minimise and we've got to get out of so many of these problematic plastics. And it's not just a waste issue, it's becoming a fertility issue as well, where a growing percentage of society are impacted by fertility issues associated with the cocktail effect of plastics. Plus, there's also now evidence that there's all these other illnesses associated with the synthetics that we're all exposed to, you know. So I've said this, I don't know, any chance I get, but I think we've got to focus on that upstream advocacy position to say we have to get a different methodology of how we package stuff, how we distribute plastics. How we do that, I don't know. It hasn't worked yet, but it's been a big scam for decades trying to get people to do better with their plastics recycling. And now it's been completely exposed that it doesn't work. Education is a distraction, and we have, as a council, and we're one of the most powerful sectors in the country. How many councils have we got? We've got 595, is it? Something like that. Imagine if we collectively said, we're not going to touch soft plastics anymore. Tricky, hard stuff to do, but we've got one of the biggest sectors in the country, and if we all actually collaborated on this, and everyone's struggling with soft plastics, there could be an outcome. So I would think that we should be advocating to the Australian Local Government Association, whatever they're called, out there.
Like that.
Yep. To say, well, we need a united front on soft plastics in the country, led by us and the 29 councils in Tasmania. And there you go.
Thank you.
I'll,
Thank you, Councillor
pull
Harvey.
back there.
Good stuff. Thank you. Councillor Sherlock, any comment? Councillor Posselt?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for your presentation. Councillor Harvey is the eminent expert in this field, so from a council perspective, so I'll defer to him for most of the commentary, but I'm the person most interested in quarries, as the CEO is well aware. I was pleased to read on the LMS Energy website that the Hobart facility exports 4,700 megawatts through gas, which is the equivalent of 11,000 cars being removed from the roads. I was wondering if you talked about the scale required to enhance solar or to use LMS for solar and there not being enough area. Have we spoken to LMS, and if we haven't, can we, about linking the McRoby's site with the Lena Valley Quarry site, which is just over the hill and will provide significantly more area for them to do their calculations?
No, we haven't had that. Lena Valley hasn't come into the conversation.
Is it possible to have a chat with them and maybe they can do some analysis?
It is. I need to take that on notice and find out a bit more about Lena Valley.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
That'd be awesome. Thanks so much. And thanks for your presentation. It's a really important, one of the biggest projects in some respects that the council's doing, so I really appreciate your work, so I'm sure my colleagues around the table do too.
Councillor Logan?
Thank you, Chair. I've just got one sort of area to talk about here. I won't go into the same areas as the other guys. Great presentation. There's lots of opportunities here, I think. There's problems, but there's plenty of opportunities. I was just wondering about the in-vessel green waste composting that we're thinking about doing. I happen to know, we've got a lot of green waste. Taswater has got a lot of nitrogenous stuff at Sells Point. Obviously, they're going to have a bit of a centre there now, a much bigger facility. Has there been any thought maybe about trying to put our in-vessel things somewhere near the Sells Point sewage farm or sewage plant, so that we can access all of that nitrogenous material that they've got? They've got so much of it. They've got more than we could use. But I just think that would be a sensible place to put it if all the nitrogenous stuff goes to where all our carboniferous stuff, all of our carbon waste goes to where there's a huge supply of nitrogen. I feel like that would really help with things like transport and so on. I guess there's issues with space in that side. Everybody wants to put something there lately. But I just wondered what we were thinking, I guess, about the in-vessel composting and where we might put them, because my understanding is that deals with the odour, it deals with a lot of the odour issues that the windrows are having.
Do you want me to answer that? Yeah. The Southern Tas Organics Working Group, which has had 3 or 4 meetings, it's been 9 or 10 months, has reps from all the main councils, the main contractors, and NRE and the EPA, and Taswater.
Yep, great.
So you're right, there's 20,000 tonnes of annual biosolids coming out of Taswater's wastewater treatment plants. So obviously they've got a vested interest in solving this problem, as have all the councils. What we've all agreed on is the need to join all our waste together, because the cost of these facilities is of the order of $10 to $20 million to process the total organics for the southern region of all those entities combined. Without going into too much detail on what some of those discussions have involved, yes, so for example, Sells Point is one potential option, but it's only an option.
Yep.
There's been no decisions made.
Sure.
Because I think there's still a lot of collaborating and work to be done before a decision can be made.
I think it's good to hear that Taswater have a rep on that group.
Yeah.
And obviously they're building their own sort of digester of some sort there, but I'm not sure if it'll be to scale, so it's not going to be able to handle everything.
And you're right about in-vessel, there's no methane emissions from in-vessel. The scrubbers remove all of it.
Yeah, expensive, but really good. No, thank you. Thanks for the presentation. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you, Councillor Logan. Councillor Dutton?
Thank you for your presentation. Again, appreciate it. Just 2 issues. One is with regards to the waste education aspect. how are we tracking, how are we making an impact into the community with regards to that aspect, with regards to wastes and education? And the second point I'm just wanting to raise here and ask for information and clarification. Has there been a discussion with other councils with regards to coming together? And if there is, at what stage are we, or we haven't started yet?
So we've recently just recruited a new waste officer for education and communications. And as I alluded to in the slide earlier, we believe, because this is a shared problem across all the councils, that some shared solutions around community education would be really useful, because it's not just, it's all our councils. It's the community, doesn't stop at the council borders. So we're looking at, we're engaging with Tasway South, which is the body that represents, is the coordination of the 12 southern councils, to advocate for community education. Now that's going to therefore require, as you said, tracking and reporting and feedback from the community as part of that process. I did allude to earlier that one measure for tracking that is our bin audits. We think it's probably one of the better mechanisms, looking at our curbside bins. Maybe do 6 months or 12 months of advocacy and education with the community, redo our audits and continue like that under our waste strategy to see a desired improvement in decontamination of the bins.
And just a follow-up there, please. So with regards to waste, do you still find a lot of people dumping everything into one, green waste or the red or the yellow when they should be separating? Do you have that problem?
Yes, in the organics bins.
Okay.
Sorry, okay. It is a problem in the organics bins, but it's a bigger problem in the general waste bin,
Right.
in the red bin. So the bins are misleading, because when you say that an organics bin has 50%, readily the residual waste bin has 50% organics, it's actually only 25% because you're comparing it with a FOGO bin that's twice the size. A more correct measure is, that I like to use from our audits, is that 85% of City of Hobart's residential waste for organics is going in the correct bin. If you split that into green waste and food, it's quite different. 95% of green waste is going in the correct bin. Now, this is last year's figures. Only 23% of food waste is going in the correct bin. So the problem sits with food. Green waste dominates our FOGO bins, but food waste is where we need behavioural change in the homes. It's more than behavioural change. We need resources. We need education, targeted, broad across the community. Those numbers are pretty similar, replicated across the other councils as well, the urban councils. It's a bit of squeezing the ring, that extra bit to try and get extra performance, but it's necessary. We have work to do on food contamination in the general waste bins.
Councillor Riley?
Yes, and just to stay on that topic, because I will, sorry to labour on it, but I want to do some social media, make sure I understand and have the facts right. So with the green bins, what percentage of those are contaminated? Roughly? I think I heard about half, or was that?
Yeah, if Fiona can answer, if you can answer it,
So,
otherwise.
the FOGO bin,
Or the green lid bin?
yeah, the green bin lid, food organic, garden organic, only 3% of that has contamination in it. It's
really
really good. People are using those bins really well.
Okay.
It's just the fact that in the
Red bin.
red
is too much.
lid bin, 50% of that red bin is still food matter.
Yeah, that
A
includes
very
my house.
small amount of it garden matter, but it's all the food.
Yeah, right. So all food, no matter what it is, can go in the green bin?
Everything organic, even 100% wool, 100% cotton, clothing, bones, anything.
Dog poo bags.
Yep, dog poo bags, as long as it's got a compostable and biodegradable label.
Yeah. And the yellow bin, is that
Yep.
pretty good?
I wouldn't say it's good, but it's 10% contamination for the urban councils,
Okay.
30% regional.
Oh, and what was the $10 cost you referred to? Is that when, as you said, there's something about it, when a bin's contaminated, it costs $10? as you're going through your presentation, or did I put information together? Okay, I thought there might be a cost involved when there's contaminated bins to, I thought you might have been talking about the green waste being contaminated or the yellow being contaminated.
Yep.
Yeah, it'd only be when they're picking up the entire load and the truck has got X amount of contamination, in which case there may be an issue from that. But we're pretty good in terms of Hobart, in terms of the amount of contamination we have compared to some other councils.
All right, thanks. Yeah, there's definitely some big decisions to come. One thing that will stand out for me when we're looking at, you know, making the biggest decisions is around false economy. Like, is it really worth driving it to this location for it then to be sorted and then for it to be driven back to this location? Does it make more sense to, instead of going A, B, C, go A to C? A big thing is that location, the current site, even the right site to have the tip shop and sorting centre at all. Like, should we be driving up this little narrow...
I did allude to that. We have a transfer station that
Yeah.
currently works. Is it just, should we just focus more on improving that?
Yeah,
So we have looked at, looking at different sites.
Yeah, okay, because that's what I would be interested in, not just taking it for granted that that's makes the site.
That's right.
And just, these are for my own interest really, but what on state, like and obviously I agree with the whole approach of multiple councils and statewide approach and economies of scale with processing and all that sort of stuff, but what, in Tasmania, what do we recycle? Is it glass we recycle in Tasmania?
Yes.
And do we recycle any plastics in Tasmania?
Not on island.
I don't believe so.
No.
It all goes to Melbourne
Not on
currently.
island, no.
Yeah.
So we recycle glass, and that's, Hazel Brothers use that as crushed road base.
Yeah.
It's not used for anything else at the moment, and we recycle metal. So we
Yeah.
have, up in the north of the state, a foundry that can do that.
Yeah. Because part of me that just would like to know that, is it worth it if it's all being bundled up and then transported? I mean, it'd make a difference if it's all electric transport, but in terms of emissions of the transport, transporting it to this location, up to South Hobart, then down to Workcopping, or then to some ship, and then it goes pumped out, and then it goes over there, and then God knows how much of it they really recycle. I just wonder if it's all just a big feel-good project. I mean, I do. But I get really, and I get really upset when I see like plastic litter pollution is something that I do get upset about. Sport my cruise. I had to go along the beach and pick up plastic for the first however long when we got to this remote island beach, and it was really upsetting. But yeah, I guess my feedback is that we look at it from the very biggest questions.
So we will do that, because we'll be looking at transport, it's part of it, and when we look at all these options there, we want to look at the transport options as well at the same time, because there are emissions as well. And you're right in terms of, you know, the recycling, you know, you spend a lot of money recycling, it's a lot of feel-good sort of stuff in some areas there, but of course what actually happens with it is it sort of doesn't add up financially sometimes, but I mean...
And as part of that, like we talk about the education, because the whole life cycle needs to be mapped out in terms, including confronting the realities at the end of what happens with the stuff. Because I would argue that communicating to the public about the real picture is stuff that will actually induce the behaviour change. And I think we should be investing in the avoidance and replacement rather than the management.
Yep.
Bloomfield.
Single-use plastics. You know, we've introduced that policy through here. I had a very interesting text recently where they were suggesting that Coles and Woolworths had an exemption to that. Is that correct?
No, we don't believe that's the case, but I'm looking into that. That statement's come to me as well. There isn't actually an exemption under the bylaw, so we're investigating that.
Yeah, that's okay, because I was just kind of curious. I just hadn't heard of it before myself. The other thing was too, as far as all this goes, I just see so many moving parts that I very much understand that it's going to take a while for you to work out your best mix. So I'm really happy to leave you guys to do that. You know better with that. The other thing was too that, you know, we constantly see projects overseas where they'll take say fibre and they'll recycle fibre, or they'll recycle different types of things like cardboard, or they'll recycle concrete. There was one I read recently, it might have been from parts from council recycling concrete. Is that something, I guess we don't have the scale to really have anything to can actually make money from it, but I almost wonder whether or not there could be expression of interest in some of these if we've got anything that's a particularly large quantity to see if there's someone who could make money from it. Therefore, it shifts the away from us, but kind of...
Yeah, no, it's a commodity, so you'll definitely, that's part of the business case that we'll be presenting to you in terms of what's the best options for us as a city, so.
Yeah, that's what I just did see out there, that was all. That's all I have, thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Suko. Okay, one last comment.
Okay, one more go.
Yeah.
I just wanted to respond to Ben's interest in the biosolids, and just to say that it's awkward with biosolids because they're full of nanoplastics, microplastics, pharmaceuticals and PFAS. And mixing that in with our compost, for example, I wouldn't want. Currently they're being sprayed on farmland, which is really wacky. You know, I think few of us are aware of where they put their biosolids and what their solution is. They haven't got one, Taswater, but they're talking about biodigesters to capture the energy from the methane. But I'm going to say it. The best methodology for treating your biosolids is biochar because it destroys the nano, micro, pharmaceuticals and PFAS. But they're challenging the PFAS, Taswater. Other water companies are saying we're tired of talking about it, we're going to use biochar to process the biosolids. Then you end up with something clean that can be put back into farmland without any questions, basically, of contaminating your farmlands or going up the food cycle into us. So I would really like to look at the options in other water companies as well. And if we could convince Taswater that the best practice is not just to make biogas from it, but then that said, there's also capacity in their biodigesters to take some of the organic waste, especially the putrescible stuff.
The wet.
Yeah, the wet stuff, to make it into methane or biogas to make electricity, which is what I think we'll be looking at as well as a component of this. But the organic stuff's really interesting, so if I was in charge, I've already worked it all out.
Keep it brief.
No, I'll leave it at that, I won't.
That is brief. Thank you, Councillor. Just a couple of things from my point of view. Postcode. So, interested to know what the postcode split might be. We're all asked a postcode when we go up to Macrobius. I was the other day. What postcode I come from? Do you know any rough idea? Some semblance? I'm not asked to the single digit, but just I was curious when I was asked.
Yeah, we're taking it from everyone, and it's around 30% is not from within Hobart.
Okay.
But also, we know that some of our local builders and users of the site have cottoned onto it, so we get a lot of 7,000s.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And until we can get to the point where we might have something like registration plate recognition, which then logs directly to where that vehicle's registered, it will always just be, we won't have the accuracy.
Okay. Thank you. The other thing was, what an incredibly strategic place that is up there. It's in the foothills of the mountain. I like the idea of the education centre, the information centre and all that. It could also be a bit of a launching pad. It's a bloody big area up there when you get deep back. For people doing the bushwalk thing as well.
Yeah.
And I think parking, bit of a cafe thing, or there's toilet facilities and all that, if that could be dovetailed in there, it's a bit of a synergy happening there.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably worth putting on your big plan there. Yeah, I mean, we've got a real opportunity to make a fantastic PR story here for the council. This is something people can get their heads around. It's very... the statistics are fantastic that you hear, and it's really good to hear how obedient people are with what they're putting in the bins and that. And even a commentary like that, it's a really encouragement for people to know. Because I often think whatever goes in recycling, most people are putting rubbish in there. To hear those stats, to me, I find that really good. And I mean, what a great conversation this has been, and congratulations on a fantastic report here too, by the way. one of the better ones I've seen come across the table for a long time, not taking away from other people in the room. But, here we have climate conferences, and I'm not taking anything away from climate conferences, but I tell you now, you could have a bloody big weekend to this, and I think this would draw in a huge part of the community, from children to older people and all that. It's very understandable. It's the here and now. We're actually doing our stuff every week. We put that wheelie bin out. And to hear what I've heard tonight has been a real eye-opener to me, some of this stuff. And well done. I think we're really on the right track here, and I look forward to hearing a whole heap more. So that community thing, I think, is a big key to it as well. And to that end, thank you very much.
One more quick comment.
Very quick.
I remember a statistic from the people who run the MRF, who said the MRF is Materials Recovery Facility. It's where we take all our recycling. And if you haven't been there, it's a really interesting place. You expect, Batman to swing out of the rafters there. It's just this really industrial, 19th century kind of setup. It's really interesting. So a tour of that would be good for people. But 25% of the stuff that goes into the MRF goes to landfill. So that's across the region, not just Hobart, but ours is low. We've got the lowest rate of contamination in the recycling bins. But there's 25% contamination across that goes through the MRF, as I understand. I remember the figure from the...
Bill, can I just correct you?
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but it's 18%.
Well, it was 25% when the bloke from the MRF spoke to us at one of the Southern Waste Council meetings, as I recall.
The most recent audits have shown 18%.
Okay, so it's dropped a little bit. That's great.
Okay, I didn't go.
Yeah.
10 for Ernie and 4 for the...
Yeah.
All right, but it was right at the time. But that's money we're spending on landfill. So there's a component of this that it costs us money for that contamination, is the point I wanted to make.
Yeah, okay, point taken. Thank you again.
Thanks very much.
It's been fantastic, Chris. And
Thanks for your
David.
support.
No worries, great. Item 7.2 is consultation, the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act, LUPA, preventing delays in development assessment timeframes. So I'd invite Director of Teaching and Regulatory Services to introduce the item and make the presentation. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you, Chair. I don't have a PowerPoint presentation tonight. So the State Government has released to both this item and the next item on the agenda relate to some relatively small changes within the development system by making changes to both the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act and the Local Government Building and Miscellaneous Provisions Act. The state government is clearly focused on trying to generate an efficient development system overall, alongside obviously the plumbing report we had earlier. These two are on the agenda for workshopping, and then we'll come to the council meeting later this month. Many of the points that are raised in both of the consultation papers are quite technical. For example, focusing on valid planning applications. It's essential that everybody understands whether or not, given how sensitive the statutory timeframes are, it's important that everybody understands where we start, what's day zero, and where we go forwards from there. Likewise, in terms of interpreting the legislation for understanding various parts that start and stop the clock, it's very important that we understand those. One section of one of the papers focuses heavily on requests for information and whether or not there are too many requests for information, the nature of those, whether or not that creates uncertainty. So we've provided responses that we think are appropriate in the context of Council's role as regulator. We do appreciate the need for an efficient development system, but overall we do think it's important that obviously applications are complete and accurate. We have taken the opportunity at the end of this paper to highlight some other changes that we think could be made to the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act. There are lots of little tweaks and glitches in the system essentially, so we've highlighted those and would be happy to speak to the state government more if they were interested in those. The next item on the agenda, which also focuses on some of the strategic
aspects of planning. So one of those is a tidy up to do with the regional land use strategy, making sure that that's appropriately dealt with in LUPA. It is worth drawing to elected members' attention the ability to introduce interim amendments to the state planning provisions as proposed. We think on the one hand that this is a welcome change and can make life easier for everybody. On the other hand, it could potentially introduce quite significant changes that has implications for our municipality, like we had with visitor accommodation. So we've urged that that there are some guardrails around that process. Otherwise, I think we, as I said, we do applaud the efforts of the state government to make the system more efficient overall, and we are always willing to work with the state government to assist them in the best way to do that. I'm really available for questions if anybody.
Any comments,
That's
questions
Chair.
from anyone? Mark, what do you think?
I'm going to comment again. You've got everything reported, do you?
Well, the session we had earlier was in a closed briefing, but
Okay. Oh, I just made the comment because we were discussing the building code of a building code where builders can build up to $5,000 without having to come to council on modifications. And I made the point, and this is to those elected members who may not have been here. I made the point that $5,000 doesn't get you anywhere these days. It should be up to at least $10,000. But we could have a plumbing situation where plumbers are registered with the council that can do modifications to a certain point in houses, and like putting an extra toilet into a house doesn't change the dynamics of the whole house unless they're doing some major buildings or putting a new sink in or putting a new bathroom, doing a complete reno of a bathroom. And a lot of the plumbers I get frustrated with having to go through those little processes. And I think we can find a better solution, a better way of doing it all, So at the moment, if someone wants to put let's say you've got a bathroom and it has no toilet in it, a bathroom, nice big bathroom, you've got no toilet and you want to put a toilet in there, you have to go through a lot of rigmarole just for one toilet. And I think there are simple ways, especially if you've got registered plumbers with the council that can do works to a certain point. I think we should start thinking outside the square on the way we handle the plumbing permits in a small way. That's what I said.
thank you. We will amend the.
That's what I said, and it could be something that could make it life easier for these small renovations.
Thank you, Alderman Bloomfield. Any comments?
I meant to re-mention all the things that we mentioned earlier in the other meeting. It would be just, we had a bit of a debate about the concept of measuring how many RTIs were kind of coming through, and I would challenge that it shouldn't just be that the council being judged, but it should also be the builders, simply because when you're dealing with professional integrity, who's actually adjudicating what is right and wrong, we don't want one side going the other. And at the moment I feel council has borne the brunt of everything being considered wrong, whereas we are fully aware in this room that some applications come through which are very poor, and that needs to be tabled just as strongly as whatever council may or may not be doing. So I would like that to be somewhat framed, if we could.
Thank you, Chair. We do acknowledge that there are certain developers and certain times of year, for example, leading into Christmas, there tends to be a little bit of a effort of people lodging applications, probably just to get it off their desks at the end of the year, clearly incomplete. So we do need to issue RFIs in those times.
Councillor Elliott, Councillor.
Yeah, I think you have the expertise and the professionalism to deal with this, and I think you've done well, and also to raise the other issues that you have. So I quite think supportive of the way it's been approached. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lovergo.
No, I'm happy with what the staff have put together. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Sherlock. Councillor Harvey.
Just one question with regard to the state legislation that's been put through to freeze the building code. That's got nothing to do with this, they're two separate issues, the building code
Yes.
and the planning scheme.
Correct.
And Alderman Zuko's discussion about toilets, that's building code rather than planning?
That's plumbing code, but we dealt with that one earlier, yeah.
Yeah, which is a different area, yeah.
Thank you. And the only two comments I made was any streamlining we can do would be fantastic, and that a general understanding of a simple flow chart for people who are doing plumbing for the first time, or even people who are experienced, to be just good to crystallise out their forms, to set out in time frames on a one page. Was my only other commentary. So thank you very much, Karen, for that. Okay, that's all. Simple two.
We should be both.
Okay, good. Okay. So now on to item number 8, as the 7.3 is covered by the same one before, responses to questions without notice.
So moved, Chair.
So moved. No questions or debate on any of those? No debate, sorry. So we'll put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Okay, the motion carried unanimously. Okay, and moving along to questions about notice. Any questions about notice from anyone from the table? No? Okay, no problem. All right, I'll move that, see if someone can move that we move the closed portion of the meeting. Moved by Councillor Hovey. All those in favour? Against? Carried unanimously. Thank you very much for those participating. As far as the open portion went, we now move into the close. So if someone can close the door there, please.